My name's Audrey Chan. I'm an artist based in Los Angeles. I'm originally from Chicago, and I'm the daughter of two immigrants. My dad grew up in southern China, and my mom grew up in Taiwan, and they met at the University of Illinois when they were in grad school. They're both retired professors now, and so I grew up in a kind of academic family. My parents were always extremely supportive of me and my sister as creative people. My mom actually wanted to be an artist, and so I think she let that grow in me. So I moved between working in drawing, public art, video, writing, performance. In this case, I'm creating a newspaper that involves like drawing and writing and some design. I love drawings that feel like line drawings that could appear in like animation or comics or even like diagrams from like manuscripts hundreds or thousands of years ago. In my practice, I move a lot between work that deals with like my family history and personal narrative. And I've been lucky enough to have the opportunity to work on public art projects that deal with social justice and like multi-generational storytelling rooted in LA and Southern California in general. In that work, I see my process as being part of a larger community of like organizers and historians and storytellers and image makers who want to remind people of like how important stories are to our sense of self. And when we can't see the stories of people who are like marginalized or people who have been like fighting for change, that limits our sense of what we think is possible. I actually worked in the museum field for several years in education, so I don't take for granted how a museum collection comes together and how its presentation and didactics and even how a collection is marketed affects how work is interpreted. And I very much see museums as like the physical manifestation of a set of values about what is worthy of being protected and preserved and what is worthy of being placed on display in a pristine, quiet space where admission is charged. And the weight that's attached to those objects to convey histories that no single object should ever have that burden to carry. What really struck me when I was walking through the permanent collection galleries, especially in the Chinese collection, how so many of the objects reminded me of like decorations and like figurines that are in my parents' home, like what I grew up with. I was like, oh, what would it be like if the pieces in my parents' home had like didactic texts attached to them? Like, how would I feel in relation? Whereas like in my home, they're mixed in with the stuff of everyday life. They're not necessarily like separated out and like placed on a pedestal. They're maybe like sitting on the radiator or on a shelf or in the living room. I was like asking myself, do I see myself in these objects outside of that context? And it takes like a certain amount of projection to make the leap from like me in 2021 to like a piece from like the Tang Dynasty, even to think back like what does it mean to be Chinese in like the 1300s versus now in diaspora. That range of associations is what really intrigued me about this project. I wanted to do the reverse of putting objects on a pedestal. I wanted to like bring them back to the everyday. I chose the form of the newspaper because, like, for example, when I was growing up, my grandparents and like my extended family would read the World Journal, which is this Chinese language newspaper that's distributed like across North America. They'd just be sitting there with piles of it, piling up on the floor as they like read through all the sections. And, in the Midwest, we weren't necessarily in an area that had a lot of Chinese American or Asian American people. And so that newspaper, pre-internet, felt like a kind of lifeline. At the same time, I couldn't read those newspapers myself. I was like, how can I take this form and like make it my own? The title of the newspaper is 重温旧梦. It's a Chinese idiom that means to relive old dreams. I'm not the first artist to create takeaway multiples in a gallery context, but it does kind of shift the relationship between like the art object and the viewer. It's like it's an invitation to be a part of the artwork and to activate it, because honestly you can't really experience it until you pick it up yourself and like open it and make it your own and hopefully take it home with you. So I like that a newspaper kind of disrupts the narrative of like what is valuable, since newspapers are kind of designed to be consumed and then thrown away.